This is bad. 38 coffins were carried across London yesterday to the Department for Transport's head office. One representing each death on so-called smart motorways between 2014, when they were introduced, and 2019. The government's target was to turn all motorways into smart lanes by 2025. But a report from the Commons Transport Select Committee this morning has said that those plans should be suspended.
Well, Claire Mercer founded the group Smart Motorways Kill after her husband, Jason, was killed on the M1 in 2019, and she led the procession yesterday and joins us live now. Claire, I'm so sorry for your loss, and we've been talking this morning about, frankly, how frightening smart motorways are. Yesterday, the Transport Select Committee said, let's put them on pause because the safety data isn't strong enough. You know the tragedy of smart motorways. Just talk to us about Jason and what happened.
He had a minor collision on the M1, junction 34. They were at a sign that said no hard shoulder for 4 miles. There was no sign saying that there was a refuge area a mile out of sight. They couldn't get out of the live running lane because of the crash barrier, and they themselves couldn't get over the crash barrier because there was a 30-foot drop onto the slip road below. So they were stranded in a live running lane.
And what happened?
And a HGV came along and ploughed into them because HGVs can't manoeuvre in the same distance that a Fiat 500 can. It never stood a chance. So it ploughed into them, killed them instantly, and even when they were dead across all 4 lanes of the road and it was a scene of utter carnage, even then the technology didn't pick them up. It relied on members of the public phoning in. They were dead on the road for 6 minutes before the road was even closed.
Claire, I'm astonished that you're able to talk about it like this to the nation, but it's so important that you do. How are you now? How are you managing?
I haven't grieved. We're 2.5 years down the line and I haven't grieved. The campaign is a deflection. You know, I've had 2 years of counselling to tell me that. But at least we're achieving something, you know. And I don't know when and if I'll ever get to grieve, but hopefully this is stopping it happening to other people, because the Highways England had a very definite policy of not educating the public, because then they can't object to what they don't know about. So we've had to educate the public. We had leaflets translated into 10 languages. We have campaigned tirelessly for 2 years. I've spent a lot of my own money on this. I've given up my job. I just do this, you know, 12, 13, 14 hours a day, just sat at home campaigning to educate the public, because if we'd read a story like this, if we'd heard about smart motorways, perhaps me and my husband would have said, what's a smart motorway? What are you meant to do? Because I don't even know if he knew what one was. No.
And what happened to your husband is just one example of dozens of deaths in very similar situations.
Yes.
What is your counterpoint to the argument that the authorities keep putting forward, which is, oh well, we'll increase the number of safe lay-bys, we'll put them closer together, maybe only half a mile apart? What would you say to that?
Has your car ever broken down in a convenient spot? It could be 500 metres away. If your car will not reach that spot, it will not reach that spot, and you are still stranded in a live running lane.
I mean, I get the chills listening to you. You know, I literally go cold. And you're absolutely spot on, Claire, that until you hear about smart motorways, know about smart motorways, you don't really understand them. But the point where you really wish you understood them is when you're driving on one, because that's the point where you think, goodness me, what on earth do I do? Where is the refuge? Is the technology working? We know in too many cases the technology is not working properly.
The cameras.
Yes. The cameras which are supposed to pick up the breakdowns. Look, Claire, this Transport Select Committee report says that they question the safety record of those stretches in which the hard shoulder has been turned into a live lane. Ministers have been told not to open any more new smart motorways until they have the data to prove they are safer than traditional motorways, which is what we hear government ministers telling us repeatedly. More emergency refuge areas should be built for existing smart motorways, meaning drivers are never more than a mile, not even half a mile, but a mile away from a refuge if they break down. You must have heard recommendations, you know, over the couple of years since you lost your husband. What do you think about the fact that the Department of Transport says they will consider these recommendations?
Well, I know full well what they're going to do. They're going to ignore them because these are only recommendations. They're not enforceable. Why a parliamentary committee is not enforceable, I don't understand. But 3 times now, in the past few years, they've recommended that we don't do smart motorways at all. They said absolutely do not do them in 2015, and they just still did them. So they have no problems ignoring them from 2015 to now, so they're just going to keep on, you know, ignoring them. And it's all just talk. We just need to stop them now. We just need to turn the first lane off and have the hard shoulder back.
The point is, isn't it, I don't know if you feel this, but when I do a lot of motorway driving, and when I'm on a section of smart motorway, and I was referring to this earlier in the programme, and I see a school bus or a school coach off on a school day trip or maybe going on a holiday, my heart sinks.
Yeah.
Because what if a school bus were to break down?
Exactly.
And why wouldn't it? You know, I mean, they're not sort of miraculous machines. They break down like everything else. What if a school bus breaks down on what used to be the hard shoulder, but which is now a very active lane, and there are dozens and dozens of lorries barrelling down that lane every minute? I mean, it doesn't bear thinking about, does it, Claire?
Well, that was actually the placard that I was carrying yesterday. Will you listen when it is a coach full of school children on a day trip? That was actually the placard I was carrying yesterday, because it is a reoccurring nightmare of mine, because it will happen, because this is the carnage with just a few 100 miles of smart motorway. They are trying to turn the entire country's motorway network into these things. And you were saying about people contacting you saying they're disabled or they've got someone in a wheelchair. This is why we're having to bring disability discrimination claims as well, because if able-bodied people are, you know, in danger, disabled people are sitting ducks. And how can they even do this? You're not legally allowed to discriminate against disabled people, and yet they've done that. And then they're releasing replies to my statements saying we're committed to not opening any more sections of smart motorway without the technology in. But 2 weeks ago, they opened a section of the M4 in Berkshire with absolutely no technology in it at all.
Claire, we're getting so many messages. I'm just looking at my smart tablet here. We're getting so many messages from people who either are disabled themselves or who have disabled members of their family making this point again and again and again, saying they are terrified of using smart motorways because if they break down, they're going to be stuck. They won't be able to get over the barrier. They won't be able to get the wheelchair over the barrier. And they're making the point you're making. It's active discrimination against disabled people. You say that you think it'll just be talk, 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 but you can't truly think that. You wouldn't be campaigning, Claire, if you didn't have an end victory in sight. And you see, I happen to think that you're right, because I think that when there is some kind of extra unspeakable level of tragedy, that will be the point where no sane government could turn around and say, it's all right.
Exactly. Well, I mean, we're having to campaign because all they're doing is talking. There's been 10 reviews into smart motorways this year alone. It's all just talking. We're just paying people to sit on their bums and talk about smart motorways. Nobody's actually having to do anything. That's why we had to carry coffins to Westminster yesterday. And we're having to fight this because nobody else is doing it. They just talk about it.
One viewer here says that she saw a car that nearly hit a car that had broken down in what was the hard shoulder but was now a live lane, nearly hit it. She managed to pull in a bit further on. She called Highways England. They didn't know about it.
Exactly.
They didn't know about it until she called them.
That's what our member of staff said as well when
Absolutely
they reported the breakdown on the M23. Called 999. They didn't know. So actually, these are smart motorways. Relying on the wisdom of other drivers, aren't they? Claire, thank you so much for your interview, and you know, it'll break the hearts and chill the bones of anybody watching. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you so much.
But one thing I do want to say, your husband would be so proud of you for what you're doing. He would be so proud of you.
Thank you.
And we are very grateful to you. Thank you.
So this report stopped short of calling for smart motorways to be scrapped altogether, but it has urged ministers to consider changing to controlled versions where the hard shoulder is back in use. And the speed limit varied to manage congestion. I
Totally.
mean, that sounds like scrapping smart motorways,
That
doesn't
sounds
it?
like to me.
You're going to switch back from live lanes to hard
Yeah,
shoulder.
that's scrapping it.